The marble floor gleamed beneath fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects. Shady pines elder care on a bitter October afternoon, the kind of day when dead leaves scratched against the windows like fingernails clawing for entry. Mia Sinclair pushed the lunch cart down the hallway, her worn sneakers squeaking against the cold surface with each step. Room after room, the same routine. Soup bowls wrapped in plastic. Sandwiches cut into triangles. Applesauce in small cups that smelled faintly of iron and sugar. She was nobody. Just another caretaker in a facility where the state paid minimum wage and the residents were forgotten by everyone except the clock that marked feeding time. Her uniform hung loose across her shoulders, a size too large because she had lost weight. 12 pounds in 4 months. The kind of weight loss that came from counting calories instead of eating them. Room 304 was different. The private security guard stood outside the doorway, a man whose shoulders filled the frame, dark suit tailored so precisely it looked like armor. His hand rested near his jacket where something heavy waited. Mia had learned to recognize the shape. Guns looked the same no matter who carried them. Inside, Mrs. Catherine Valenti sat in a velvet chair beside the window. She was 78 years old but carried herself like someone who had spent a lifetime making decisions that changed other people's lives. Her white hair was styled perfectly. Her jewelry caught the light, real gold, real diamonds, the kind of wealth that did not belong in a state-funded care facility. Her daughter came twice a month. Her son never came. But his security detail was everywhere. "Mrs. Valenti, your lunch," Mia said, keeping her voice soft and steady. Catherine looked up from the window where the October wind scattered leaves like confetti at a funeral. "Thank you, dear." Mia set the tray on the small table beside the chair. Turkey sandwich. Fruit cup. And the soup. The soup in the ceramic bowl that the kitchen had prepared 30 minutes ago during the shift change. That was when Mia noticed it. The smell. Beneath the rosemary and broth, something chemical lived. Something that did not belong. Something wrong the way a sound is wrong when it comes from inside your own body and you cannot explain it. Her hand stopped moving. The spoon froze halfway to Catherine's mouth. Mia had worked in elder care for 4 years. She had learned to recognize the smell of infection in wounds. She knew the odor of medications. She understood the difference between spoiled food and fresh food. But this smell was none of those things. It was sharp. Almost metallic. Almost like the inside of a battery if you broke it open with your teeth. Her breath was visible in the cold draft from the window. Without thinking, or perhaps thinking too much with some instinct older than reason, Mia's arm moved. Her hand connected with the bowl. Soup exploded across the white tablecloth. Droplets fell like blood across the marble surface. Catherine gasped. The security guard's hand moved toward his jacket with the speed of something that had practiced this movement 10,000 times. "Wait," Mia said. Her voice shook like a candle in wind. "Wait." Something was wrong. In the soup. There is something. Catherine was looking at the bowl now, at the liquid pooling across the white cloth. At the bottom of the ceramic, a residue remained. Powdery. Granular. The color of ash. The security guard stepped forward, his face carved from granite. His eyes were the color of winter. "Do not move." Mia did not move. Catherine's hand trembled as she reached toward the bowl. She brought her fingers close but did not touch it. The smell reached all of them now, not just chemical, but sinister. The smell of something meant to stop a heart. The smell of betrayal served on a ceramic plate with rosemary for decoration. "Call him," Catherine said. Her voice was different now. Smaller. More ancient. The voice of someone who had just understood that someone she knew, someone she trusted, wanted her dead. "Call my son." The guard was already moving, already on his radio, already speaking into the darkness of his jacket. "We have a situation. Room 304. Possible poisoning." "No, she's secure." "We have a witness." A staff member. A woman named. He looked at Mia. What is your name? Mia, she whispered. Mia Sinclair. Get her out of the hallway. Stay with her. Do not let her speak to anyone. And send a team to the kitchen. I want to know who prepared this meal and where they went. Mia was pulled from the room by a second guard who appeared from nowhere. Her mind was spinning like something with broken bearings. She had just destroyed her job. She had just assaulted a patient or saved her life. The distinction did not matter to Shady Pines' elder care. She had just. Her phone was in her pocket. The one with 17 missed calls from the collection agency. The one that buzzed every morning with emails from the state about Emma. $78. That was all she had. All that stood between her niece and the foster care system. $78 and 2 weeks. And now she had no job. The security guard kept his hand on her arm as they moved down the hallway toward the break room. His grip was not cruel. It was professional. The grip of someone who had handled far more dangerous situations than a woman who made $6 an hour and could not afford to replace the shoes with holes in the soles. Sit, he said, gesturing to a plastic chair in the break room. Mia Saturday. The fluorescent lights hummed their dying sound. Outside, the October wind grew louder. The leaves continued their clawing against the windows. And somewhere in the building, perhaps in a car speeding through the Boston streets, someone was learning that the attempt on Catherine Valenti's life had failed. Someone was learning that a woman with $78 in her pocket had stopped their work. Someone was about to change her life in ways she could not imagine. 90 minutes passed. Then 2 hours. Then 3. A detective came and asked her questions. When did you notice the smell? Could you describe it more precisely? Did you see anyone near the kitchen? Do you know of any threats to Mrs. Valenti? Have you ever been to prison? Do you have any criminal history? Mia answered everything with the truth. Her voice remained steady even as her hand shook. Even as she understood with absolute clarity that she had just destroyed the only income she had. Then the door to the break room opened. The man who entered did not belong in a place like Shady Pines' elder care. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with shoulders that filled doorways the way some people fill rooms just by breathing. His suit was black and tailored by someone whose name appeared in Italian fashion magazines. It cost more than Mia made in 6 months. The watch on his wrist was gold and worth more than her car. His hair was dark and swept back from a face that could have been handsome if it did not look like it had been carved from stone by someone who did not believe in mercy. But it was his eyes that stopped the room. Storm gray. The color of a sky before a hurricane hits. The color of a man who had learned, somewhere along the way, that the world responded only to violence, money, and the willingness to use both without hesitation. This was Nicholas Valenti. Leave us, he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. The detective and the security guards withdrew without question. When the door closed, it was just Mia and Nicholas and the sound of the wind outside and the fluorescent lights humming their funeral dirge. You saved my mother's life, he said. It was not a question. Yes. I think so. The soup smelled. Wrong, he finished. You smelled poison and you acted. Most people would have been afraid. Most people would have pretended they noticed nothing. Most people would have let her drink it and called an ambulance afterward. He stepped closer. You are not most people, are you, Mia Sinclair? She said nothing. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her heart was beating so fast she could feel it in her neck. You have just lost your job, Nicholas continued. He said it as a statement of fact. The hospital will not allow you to work here after this. The paperwork has already begun. You assaulted a patient. You contaminated the meal service. You created a liability. I saved. Yes, he interrupted. His eyes held hers. You saved my mother. The woman who raised me. The woman who is the only person in this world who has ever known me as something other than what you see in front of you. His jaw tightened. Do you understand what I am about to say? Mia shook her head. Good, he said. That means you are honest, at least. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Now, let us go back to the beginning to understand how a woman with $78 and a photograph of her dead husband ended up making the decision that would change everything. 5 in the morning, and the fluorescent lights at the Boston Plasma Center on Tremont Street hummed like something dying. Mia Sinclair sat in a plastic chair the color of old teeth, watching the needle slide into her arm. The phlebotomist, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said *Janet*, didn't make eye contact anymore. They had been doing this twice a week for 8 months. By now, kindness would have felt like pity. The needle was small, but the emptying felt enormous. $17. That was what they paid her for 2 hours and 40 minutes of sitting still while her blood moved into a machine that would separate the plasma and send the rest back into her veins. On Mondays and Thursdays, she did this twice. $34 a week. Not enough. Never enough. She thought about the number that lived in her head now like a curse. $125,000. Emma was 6 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. 3 months ago, Emma's mother, Mia's sister, Catherine, had died. Not suddenly. Slowly, the way lupus kills you. First the kidneys failed. Then came the hospital stays. Then came the medical debt that grew like something alive, feeding on itself, multiplying while Catherine slept in a hospital bed and Mia sat beside her, holding her hand and watching the numbers on the bills grow larger than any number should ever be. $89,000. That was what Catherine left behind in medical debt. Then the state filed paperwork. Emma had no mother. Emma's father had disappeared 7 years ago without leaving a name. The state said Emma needed a legal guardian, and the state said Mia needed to prove she could afford to keep her. Not just feed her. Not just love her. Afford her. $36,000 in legal fees. That was the price the lawyers quoted for fighting the custody battle. $36,000 to convince a judge that a woman working double shifts had the right to keep her own niece. 2 weeks until the final hearing. 14 days for Mia to find $125,000 or watch Emma disappear into the foster system. It was mathematically impossible. It was like being told to stop the sun from setting. The phlebotomist withdrew the needle. Mia's arm felt lighter, hollowed out in a way that went deeper than just blood loss. She dressed carefully. The plasma center kept the temperature at Arctic cold, and her threadbare jacket, the one she had owned since Michael was alive, did almost nothing to stop the shaking. She pressed her hand against the bandage on her arm, feeling the small sting of the needle hole, and walked out into October air that tasted like coming snow. The walk to Shady Pines Elder Care was 47 minutes on foot. She could not afford the bus today. There was a concert tonight, a benefit concert at the community center, and someone had told her that musicians donated tips directly to people in need, no paperwork, no waiting periods. She was going to go. She had to go. It was a stupid hope, but stupid hopes were all she had left. The studio apartment in Dorchester was dark when she finally got home to change. She had shut off the heat weeks ago. Just turned the thermostat down to barely there and started sleeping in her coat, piling blankets from the donation center over top of her bed, which was a futon on the floor, which was all she could fit in a room 8 feet by 10 feet. The photograph sat on the windowsill where the light could touch it, the glass frame catching what little sun came through in October. Michael. Her husband. His smile was the same smile he had been wearing the day a steel beam fell on the construction site and killed him 2 years ago. No life insurance. They had been young and stupid and in love, and neither of them had thought he would just stop being alive one Tuesday afternoon in April. She picked up the photograph and held it for a moment. Pressed it against her chest like it could warm her. "I'm doing the best I can," she whispered. "I promise I'm doing the best I can." The photograph did not answer. It never did. Shady Pines sat on the corner of Harrison and Elm, a three-story brick building that had been a mansion in the 1920s before it became a place where old people went to wait for death. The residents called it home. Mia called it the only job that would hire her without asking too many questions about her background. She clocked in at 5:24 a.m. Started her first shift at 6:22 a.m. sharp. The kitchen was warm, at least. That was something. The smell of institutional oatmeal and coffee grounds and bleach. She pulled on the polyester uniform they gave her, blue, shapeless, with a name tag that said *Mia* in letters that were starting to peel. $14.50 per hour. 10 shifts per week, sometimes more when someone called in sick or the facility was understaffed, which was always 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. on most days. 16 hours of work, with a 1-hour unpaid lunch break. That meant she earned $130 on a typical day, before taxes, which meant she netted maybe $95. 6 of those days per week added up to $570. Before her rent of $1,400, before the lawyer, before food. The math never stopped working against her. Catherine Valenti was in room 307. She had been at Shady Pines for exactly 6 weeks now, admitted after she broke her hip falling in her own kitchen. The hip was healing well, the doctors said, but something else was wrong. The woman was tired in a way that went deeper than broken bones. Tired in a way that suggested she knew something that no one else did. Mia knocked softly before entering. Catherine was awake, sitting by the window with her hands folded in her lap. She had silver hair cut short and elegant, and she wore a pale blue cardigan that probably cost more than Mia made in a month. Everything about Catherine Valenti suggested money and grace and a life lived very differently from the one Mia was living. "Good morning," Mia said. "How are we feeling today?" Like an old woman whose hip remembers every stupid mistake she ever made, Catherine said. "But that is to be expected." She turned to look at Mia directly. "You look like you did not sleep." Again. Mia did not answer. She was pulling the blood pressure cuff from the pocket on her uniform, the plastic sticky from the humidity. "You work too hard," Catherine continued. "I see you. You think no one notices, but I notice. You work the morning shift, then you disappear for a few hours in the early afternoon, and then you come back for the evening shift. You are working 17 hours a day." "I need to," Mia said quietly. She was wrapping the cuff around Catherine's upper arm, feeling the muscle there, the strength the old woman still possessed. "Why?" The question was simple. The answer was complicated. Mia took Catherine's blood pressure, waiting for the numbers to stabilize. 138/87. Elevated, but Catherine had been elevated for weeks now. The doctors said the stress was not helping her recovery. "Because I have people who depend on me," Mia finally said. "And those people have needs that cost money." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When Mia finished removing the cuff, the old woman reached out and caught her wrist gently. "You have a kind face," Catherine said. "A face that has suffered. I recognize the look. I have that same look when I look in the mirror." She reached for her purse, which sat on the bedside table. "Take this." It was a $20 bill. The paper was crisp and new. "I can't," Mia said immediately. "You can, and you will. This is not charity. This is an old woman who has learned that sometimes people do not ask for help because they have learned that asking for help makes them invisible. You are not invisible. Not to me." Catherine pressed the bill into Mia's palm. "Take it." Mia took it. She was trembling. That evening, during her break, she walked to the downtown Boston library and sat in the public computer section. She searched for scholarship funds, grant applications, anything that might fill the gap between her actual money and the impossible number she needed. Most required applications she could not complete. Proof of income, references, background checks. Time. She did not have time. There was a concert tonight at the community center. 7 p.m. Local musicians, and someone on a forum had written that musicians always donated tips to individuals in need. No paperwork, no waiting. Direct action, direct help. She had $78 in her pocket. Every dollar had been accounted for in her head. Rent was due in 9 days. But maybe the concert would help. Maybe there was $50 there, $100, something that moved the number from completely impossible to merely devastating. She left Shady Pines at 6:30, told her supervisor she was not feeling well, and walked to the community center through streets beginning to turn dark. The October wind cut through her coat, and the bare branches of the trees clawed at the sky like something trapped. The concert hall had 150 seats. Maybe 80 people had shown up. Mia sat in the back row and listened to musicians play instruments she could not name, songs she did not recognize. The music was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. When they passed the donation hat, literally a hat, an old fedora belonging to one of the violinists, Mia did not put in her $78. She could not. That money was not hers to give. That money belonged to Emma. She watched the hat circle the room and collect maybe $200. One of the musicians, a woman about Mia's age with kind eyes, approached her after the show ended. "You did not contribute," the woman said. Not accusingly. Just a statement. "I do not have money to give," Mia said. "I came hoping to receive help, not provide it." The woman sat down beside her. "Tell me." So Mia told her. About Emma, about the hearing, about the $125,000 that might as well have been $1 billion. About Michael, about Catherine, about the plasma center and the double shifts and the studio apartment where the heat did not work. The woman listened, and when Mia finished, she took Mia's hand. "I cannot give you that money," the woman said. "I wish I could. But I know someone. Someone who helps people. Someone who has the resources to actually change lives. Let me give you his number." She wrote it on the back of a concert program. A name. Nicholas Valenti. And underneath, in smaller letters, asterisk when you have nowhere else to go. Asterisk. Mia took the program. She did not believe in miracles. The next morning, October 15th, at 6:53 a.m., Mia arrived at Shady Pines to begin her shift. Catherine was already awake, already sitting by the window. And beside her on the bedside table sat a bowl of soup. The smell was wrong. Mia knew soup. She had worked in the Shady Pines kitchen for 14 months. The soup smelled like mushroom bisque from the institutional cooler, the kind they served on Thursdays. But underneath the mushroom was something else. Something sharp and chemical. Something poisonous. Mia did not think. She did not hesitate. She walked to Catherine and took the bowl of soup and poured it down the sink in the bathroom, then turned back to Catherine with her heart beating in her throat. "Do not eat anything you did not see being prepared," Mia said. "Do you understand me?" Catherine understood immediately. Her face had gone pale. "Call the nurse station," Mia said. "Tell them you need to speak to your son. Tell them it is an emergency." And as Catherine reached for the call button, Mia Sinclair, who had $78 to her name and 2 weeks to save a world, understood that something terrible was beginning, and she had just stepped directly into its path. The October afternoon hung gray and suffocating, the kind of light that makes everything look like it's drowning. 2:47 p.m. at Shady Pines Elder Care in Boston, and the dining room smelled like institutional gravy and floor wax. Mia Sinclair moved between tables with the kind of invisible efficiency that came from 14 months of double shifts, her name tag catching the weak light filtering through rattling windows. She had $78 in her pocket and nowhere left to go. Catherine Valenti sat by the window, her arthritic fingers trembling slightly as she lifted her spoon. She had been at Shady Pines for 8 weeks, a woman in her mid-70s with silver hair pinned carefully and eyes that still held sharp intelligence despite the fraying at the edges of her mind. Mia had learned to sit with her during breaks, listening to stories about the North End, about a son who had become something powerful and frightening, about regrets that tasted like rust. The soup arrived on the regular lunch cart at 2:43. But something was wrong. The young man delivering it was not from the kitchen. Mia knew every face in the kitchen after 14 months. This one was maybe 25, nervous hands covered in old scars, a neck tattoo of something Mia could not quite read. He set Catherine's bowl down with too much care, too much attention. Watched her reach for it. Smiled in a way that made Mia's spine contract like a fist. She moved without thinking. 3 steps. 4. She leaned close to Catherine's shoulder and smelled it immediately. The rosemary was real, the institutional mushroom bisque was real, but underneath lived something chemical and sharp. Something that did not belong in food. Mia's hand shot out and swept the bowl away from the old woman's lap. Soup exploded across the white tablecloth, splattered across Catherine's silk blouse in dark amber stains. "I am so sorry," Mia said, her voice steady even as her hand shook. "So clumsy. So sorry." But Catherine's eyes had already found Mia's, and in that single moment of contact, understanding passed between them like electricity. Catherine understood that this was not an accident. Catherine understood that someone had tried to kill her. The young man was already moving toward the exit. Frank, the security guard, a man with a sagging face and a belt weighted with equipment he rarely had reason to use, drew his weapon. His voice came out rough and loud, "Stop. Now." The young man ran. Frank shouted into his radio. Within 30 seconds, 3 other staff members were moving toward the kitchen exit, and Mia was already leading Catherine to her room, her arm steady around the old woman's waist, her mind calculating everything that had just happened in those 4 seconds between normalcy and catastrophe. "Do not speak about this to anyone yet," Mia whispered. "But call your son. Tell him it is an emergency. Tell him someone tried to poison you." Catherine's hands were ice in Mia's grip. "You smell it too." It was not soup. No. It was not. 8 minutes passed. 8 minutes of Mia holding Catherine's hand while police arrived and security swept through the facility, while administrators began making panicked phone calls, while the young man vanished like smoke into the Boston afternoon. 8 minutes until the sound changed. A sound Mia had never heard at Shady Pines. The sound of engines, powerful, synchronized, purposeful. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the entrance. Men emerged wearing suits that cost more than Mia's monthly rent, their movements coordinated like a military unit. They did not walk into the building. They moved through it like a tide. Security personnel stood aside. The administrator, a trembling man named Dr. Brennan, suddenly looked like he was about to pass out. And then he arrived. Nicholas Valenti filled doorways. That was the first thing anyone noticed. 6'3", shoulders broad enough to block the light, wearing a black suit tailored so precisely it looked like armor. His hair was dark, slicked back with the kind of care that suggested discipline. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, a pale line that caught the light. But it was his eyes that stopped breathing, dark water where things drown, the kind of eyes that had watched violence and decided to become it. He moved to his mother without hesitation. His hand on her face was gentle, precise, checking for injury with the tenderness of a man who had learned to show love only to Catherine. He asked her questions in a low voice. She answered. His expression did not change. Then he turned to Mia. The shift in his attention felt like weather changing. Like the air pressure dropping before a storm. His eyes traveled across her stained scrubs, the dried soup on her sleeves, her hospital-grade shoes with the worn heel. Her name tag. And when he finally spoke, his voice came out quiet and heavy, like an oath being sworn. "You stopped her from eating." It was not a question. Mia nodded. "The smell," Mia said. "Chemical." "Wrong. A man I did not recognize brought the soup. He wanted to watch her eat it." Nicholas turned to Frank. "Get the bowl to a lab. I want analysis in 2 hours. Every molecule." Then back to Mia, "Come with me." The mansion in Beacon Hill existed in a different world than Shady Pines. The marble floors reflected chandelier light like dark water, cold and pristine and hostile to anything imperfect. Security cameras tracked every angle. Armed guards stood at doors wearing earpieces and expressions of absolute emptiness. Mia's reflection in the polished surfaces looked like a ghost, translucent and helpless against so much expensive stone. Nicholas's office was on the 3rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, but the windows were monitored, the glass reinforced. A desk of dark wood that probably came from a tree that had been growing when Mia was born. Chairs positioned so carefully that no one could approach him without being seen. 2 men stood behind him. Sergio, wide, dense, knuckles like scarred stone from years of work Mia did not want to understand. Sal, lean and grey and dead behind the eyes, the kind of man who had seen things so terrible he had simply stopped reacting to the world. "Tell me everything," Nicholas said. Mia told him. The new kitchen aid, the nervous hands, the careful placement of the bowl, the chemical smell beneath the herbs, the way he smiled. She told him how long she had worked at Shady Pines, how carefully she had watched everything, how certain she was that this was not standard. Her voice did not shake. She would not let it shake. When she finished, Nicholas asked the question that changed everything. "Why do you work doubles?" Mia's hands closed into fists. No one had asked her that before. No one at Shady Pines asked personal questions. Caregivers were invisible. They existed to serve, to clean, to vanish when the work was done. "My sister died 18 months ago," Mia heard herself saying. "She left a daughter. Emma. She is 6 years old. I am her guardian now. But the state will take her away in 2 weeks if I cannot pay the medical debt and the lawyer fees." The number came out of her like something poisoned. $125,000. Exactly. I have $78 right now. I work doubles at Shady Pines and 4 nights a week at St. Augustine's Hospital, and twice weekly I donate plasma because every dollar counts, but $125,000 feels like asking me to build a bridge to the moon with my hands. The room was so quiet the distant hum of the building's climate control became overwhelming. "Why did you risk your job to save my mother?" Nicholas asked. "Because it was right," Mia said. Something shifted in his expression. It was brief, a movement across his face so small that Sergio and Sal nearly missed it. But it happened. His eyes changed. The dark water became something else. Something tender. "Sergio, get me her information. Full background check, financial records, everything. And call my lawyer. Tell him we have a situation requiring immediate attention." Sergio's hand moved to his phone without hesitation. Sal remained motionless, but his dead eyes had found Mia's face, studying her like she was something that needed to be understood. "You will stay here tonight," Nicholas said. "You are a witness to an attempted murder. You may also be in danger. Sergio will show you to a guest room. In the morning, we will discuss what comes next." He stood, which meant the conversation was over. But before Mia could move, he spoke again, his voice lower. "You asked why I care. You saved my mother's life when you could have walked away. That makes you somebody. Not nobody. Somebody." The guest room was larger than Mia's entire apartment. Clean sheets. Soft lighting. A bathroom with running water that came out hot without hesitation. Mia sat on the edge of the bed and did not move for 40 minutes. She thought about Emma sleeping in the apartment 3 miles away with Mrs. Chen, who watched her on nights Mia worked. She thought about the $125,000. She thought about the young man with the poisoned soup and who had sent him. At 9 a.m. the next morning, Catherine requested Mia's presence in the mansion's conservatory. The October light came through glass panels, slanting across a garden that would not survive winter. Catherine sat in a chair that looked like it had been waiting for her, and when Mia entered, the old woman smiled like they had been friends for years instead of months. "Sit with me," Catherine said. "Please." Mia Saturday. Catherine poured tea from a silver pot with shaking hands, and Mia reached forward and steadied her grip. For a moment, they were simply two women holding a teapot together, and something in Mia's chest unclenched. "Tell me about Emma," Catherine said. Mia told her. 6 years old. Loved books, loved drawing, drew pictures of colors for sad days. Scared of the dark because of the nightmares, scared of losing Mia because she had already lost everyone else. Mia described the way Emma's voice sounded in the morning, the way she said her prayers without really believing in God but doing it anyway because hope was a habit. Catherine listened with complete attention. When Mia finished, Catherine asked to see the photograph. Mia produced it, the only thing she carried that mattered, Michael in his work clothes, laughing at something Mia had said the moment before she clicked. 2 years dead. Emma had been 4. "You have carried too much alone," Catherine said. "That ends now." She told Mia her own story then. Growing up poor. The North End before it became expensive. A man who drank and hit her son, who hit her, who made a child believe that violence was the language the world spoke. Nicholas at 5 years old, already learning to fight. The moment she finally escaped with him, the moment they found shelter, the moment she swore no child would suffer like that again. Nicholas has already decided, Catherine said. He decided the moment you knocked that bowl away. He will pay everything. The medical debt. The legal fees. Emma will be safe. You will be safe. This is how my son loves. Not with softness. With absolute action. 3 blocks away, in a warehouse in Southie with shipping containers modified into holding cells, Douglas Hale reviewed photographs. He was 58, expensive suit, salt and pepper hair, the kind of handsome that made people trust him before they understood what he was. His partner Sophie Langford stood beside him wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Mia's car had cost when it was new. Sophie held up a photograph taken outside the plasma center. A woman with exhausted eyes and calloused hands. A woman carrying a child's backpack along with her medical papers. A woman whose desperation was written across her face like a brand. "This one," Sophie said. Her voice was beautiful and cruel, the kind of voice that could describe atrocities while sipping champagne. Single. Poor. Caring for a child. No family. No one to notice when she disappears. Perfect desperation. Douglas smiled. "I'll have contacts make initial approach. Job offer. Too good to refuse. She will come." They stood together in the warehouse while 3 other women, younger, more frightened, already broken by the understanding of what would happen to them, listened from behind locked doors. That evening, Nicholas called Mia into his office. Sergio and Sal stood to the side like statues. Nicholas sat behind his desk and looked at Mia with the kind of clarity that suggested he had already made every decision that needed making. "I will pay the $125,000, he said. "I will cover all legal fees. The guardianship will be official by the end of the week." Mia's breath stopped. "In exchange, you will work as Catherine's private caretaker. She trusts you. She likes you. After the poisoning attempt, I want someone guarding her who I know is loyal." "Why?" Mia whispered. "You do not know me. I know exactly what it is like to be 6 years old and terrified you will lose everything," Nicholas said. "I know what it is like to watch your mother work until her hands bleed. Because I have lived that. Because my mother lived that. Because I can. And because it is right." Sergio began drafting paperwork. Nicholas wrote a check for $125,000 with the same casual precision he used for everything. $125,000, exact, signed with a fountain pen that probably cost more than Mia made in a year. She watched his signature appear on the paper like a miracle being written in blue ink. That night, driving home through Boston in her old Honda, Mia did not notice the black sedan that followed her for 3 blocks before turning away. But Nicholas's security cameras caught it all. And by the time Mia reached her apartment and found Emma sleeping in her bed, safe and dreaming of nothing, the wheels of something terrible were already beginning to turn. The warehouse district lay silent under a November sky that had forgotten how to brighten. Mia's breath came shallow, measured, the kind of breathing you do when every inhale means pain. The shipping container's metal walls curved around her like the ribs of something dead, and she sat curled against the cold steel with her knees drawn to her chest, one eye sealed shut by bruising so dark it looked like a permanent shadow. Handprints darkened her throat. Not just bruises, evidence. Proof that Douglas Hale's hands had been there, pressing, squeezing, stealing the air from her lungs until she saw black spots bloom across her vision like flowers opening in fast motion. Her scrubs were torn at the collar. Blood had dried on her teeth. She could taste copper and salt and the metallic tang of fear that coats your mouth when you understand you have made an irreversible mistake. Around her, other women sat in silence. 7 of them, maybe 8. Mia could not count properly because the swelling in her left eye made depth impossible. They all had the same look, the exhausted acceptance of people who had already given up, who had stopped fighting because fighting had never worked and never would. One woman, older, with grey threading through her dark hair, sat across from Mia and did not look at her. No one looked at anyone. That was the rule in places like this. 2 hours ago, Mia had believed she was going to meet with a social services representative. 2 hours ago, she had told Nicholas she had an errand, tried to smile like it was nothing, because she did not want to bother him with small administrative details. She had taken the tea across the city, watching the neighborhoods change from the relative safety near the mansion to Southie, where the streetlights were broken and the streets were empty enough that no one would hear you scream. The building number matched. She had knocked. Douglas Hale had opened the door, and in that single moment before he grabbed her, Mia had seen it all unfold in her mind like a film already shot, already finished, already projected onto a screen somewhere beyond her control. The terrible mathematics of her own stupidity. How easily predators lure the desperate. How simple it is to destroy someone who still believes in the goodness of strangers. Sophie Langford had been waiting inside with 2 men whose names Mia never learned. Sophie wore a cream-colored blouse and dark trousers, her blonde hair pulled back tight against her scalp in a style that made her face look like a skull with skin stretched over it. When she smiled, her teeth were very white and very sharp. Mia understood then that this woman had been waiting for something, and that something was her. The beating had been methodical. Not frenzied, not uncontrolled, methodical. Douglas wanted to hurt her, but Sophie wanted something else entirely. Sophie wanted her terrified. Sophie wanted her to understand that she was not important, not worthy of protection, not worth saving. With each punch and kick, Sophie whispered things. You think you matter? You think someone like him will ever come for someone like you? You're nobody. You've always been nobody. Mia had fought anyway. She had scratched Sophie's face hard enough to draw blood, leaving red lines down the woman's cheek that would scar if she was lucky. Sophie had laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and then nodded to Douglas, who wrapped his hands around Mia's throat and squeezed until her vision went dark at the edges. When she woke up, she was in the container. That had been 6 hours ago. Maybe 7. Time was different in the dark. Time was a substance that stretched and thinned and broke apart into pieces that no longer fit together into anything meaningful. Emma's voice echoed in her memory with the kind of clarity that dreams have, that trauma has. Will we lose each other? The small girl had asked this with her hand wrapped around Mia's wrist, her grip tight enough that Mia could feel her own pulse beating through her daughter's small palm. And Mia had promised, sworn on every god she didn't believe in, promised with the certainty of someone who would rather die than break her word, I will never let anyone take you from me. She had failed. The mathematical truth of it pressed down on her chest like a weight. Douglas shipped women out within 48 hours. Mia had no phone, they had taken it when they threw her in here. No one knew where she was. Even if Nicholas noticed she was missing, even if he deployed every resource his empire controlled, the probability of finding one warehouse in a city the size of Boston, finding one shipping container among dozens, finding her before Douglas moved her somewhere else, the numbers did not work. The equation did not balance. Mia touched her swollen face with trembling fingers. For the first time since Michael died, since that night when the drunk driver wrapped his Honda around a telephone pole and left her alone in the world, she believed she was not strong enough. She believed that some debts were too high to pay, that some enemies were too vast to fight, that she had been wrong her entire life to keep standing up after being knocked down, because this time there would be no standing back up. This time there was just the dark and the cold and the other women's silence pressing down on her like a burial. Then her hand found something in her scrub pocket. A small keychain. Plastic beads threaded on a cord, each bead a different color. Emma had made it 2 weeks ago, sitting at the kitchen table with her tongue poking out in concentration, her small fingers working the cord through each bead with the seriousness of a surgeon. When it was finished, she had pressed it into Mia's palm and spelled it out, AUNTMIA. Mia closed her fist around it. Not yet. 3 blocks away, Nicholas Valenti sat in his private office and understood that something was wrong. Mia had said she had an errand, a small administrative thing, nothing important. She would be back by 8 o'clock. But it was now 9:27 p.m. and the security feed showed her car was still parked near the T station in Southie, had been there for nearly 2 hours, and Mia was not answering her phone. He moved without drama. No raised voice, no pacing, no visible anger. He simply walked to Sergio's desk and said, "Find her." The quietness of his command was more terrifying than any scream. Sergio pulled the security footage. There. Mia boarding the T with a small canvas bag. There. Her getting off at Broadway Station. There. Walking toward a warehouse district where nothing existed except broken buildings and broken streetlights and the kind of darkness that swallowed people whole. There. A woman meeting her outside a building, Sophie Langford, whose file Nicholas had on his desk within 4 minutes. Sophie Langford, 34 years old, trust fund baby, daughter of a venture capitalist, currently employed by Douglas Hale as an investor and operational manager. Nicholas already had Douglas Hale on file. Douglas had been operating in Boston for 2 years, running women through shipping containers, selling them to the highest bidder, operating with the kind of arrogance that comes from believing no one will ever hold him accountable. Nicholas had been planning to eliminate him. Now Douglas had Mia, and the timeline had changed. Nicholas's response was ice-cold rage, the kind that moves like water, quietly, completely, leaving no stone unmoved. Midnight came. The warehouse district erupted with synchronized precision. 12 men in black tactical gear moved through the darkness like phantoms, their footsteps silent on the cracked pavement. Nicholas led personally, moving between the buildings with Sergio on his left and Sal on his right. They had also alerted FBI agents that Nicholas had been feeding evidence to for months. This raid would be legal, documented, prosecutable. Justice had to look like justice or it meant nothing. At Nicholas's signal, the operation began. Sergio placed breaching charges on 3 container doors simultaneously. The sound was like thunder, like the world splitting open. Doors exploded inward. Douglas's men tried to reach for weapons, but Nicholas's people were faster, moving with the efficiency of those trained in the mathematics of violence. Cable ties. Non-lethal takedowns. Professional and clean. Douglas himself was in an office adjacent to the containers, counting money at a metal desk, when Nicholas walked through the door. The moment Douglas looked up and recognized him, the moment his brain caught up with what his eyes were seeing, his entire body went rigid. "Please." The word came out like a whimper. "I didn't know she was yours. I'll disappear. I'll leave the city. Please." Nicholas did not speak. He simply nodded to Sergio, who moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. They dragged Douglas to his knees. "You'll disappear," Nicholas said, his voice steady as granite, "into a federal prison. For 40 years. Maybe more. And every single day you'll remember that you touched her." The FBI agents entered, badges visible, cuffs in hand. Douglas broke down completely, tears streaming down his face, his body shaking like something without a spine. Sophie Langford was found in another office, her cream-colored blouse still stained with Mia's blood. When she saw the badges, her composure fractured. She tried to leverage her inheritance. "Do you understand who I am? My father will have your entire careers terminated. The lead agent, a woman with cold eyes and a colder voice, did not even smile. Your father's legal team is already distancing themselves from you. We have financial records, surveillance footage, and sworn testimony from 8 victims. You're going away, Ms. Langford. Your trust fund has been frozen for restitution purposes. Your future begins right now. Sophie's face crumbled into something unrecognizable. The arrests happened at dawn for the cameras. Federal raid, federal badges, federal charges, human trafficking, kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, and a dozen others. 40-year minimum sentences. The systematic destruction of everything Douglas and Sophie had built took 3 days. 17 associates arrested across 3 states. Networks dismantled. Bank accounts seized. The machinery of justice, once activated, is difficult to stop. But Nicholas did not wait for paperwork to be filed. He drove to the warehouse himself, moving through the containers with Sergio at his side until he found the one that held her. When he opened the door and daylight flooded in, Mia was standing. One eye sealed shut. Handprints dark on her throat. Blood on her scrubs. But standing. She had been trying to pick the lock with a wire she had pulled from her bra, working at the mechanism with the kind of desperate hope that refuses to acknowledge mathematics. When she saw him, her knees gave out. Nicholas caught her before she fell, his arms closing around her with the precision of someone who has spent his entire life learning how to hold on to things before they break. Emma, Mia whispered, her voice destroyed, barely functional. I promised Emma. I promised we wouldn't lose each other. Nicholas's response came in a tone that Sergio and Sal had never heard before, something that sounded almost like the gentleness you use to soothe a terrified child. Emma is safe. She is at the mansion with Catherine. You're safe now. I have you. He carried her out himself, moving through the warehouse and into the light, where ambulances waited and FBI agents stepped aside to let the boss pass with his burden. The manuscript pages sat on the mahogany desk, unmarked and waiting. 3 weeks had passed since the warehouse. 3 weeks of bruises fading from purple to yellow, of her eye opening fully again, of Emma sleeping soundly in the room next door knowing that the woman who promised never to lose her was still there. The mansion was quiet at 11 p.m. Nicholas was downtown handling the final transitional details. 2 years he had promised her, 2 years to dismantle an empire and rebuild it into something legitimate. Catherine had gone to bed an hour ago after teaching Emma to paint sunset clouds in the conservatory. Mia sat at the desk in her room, the one with windows overlooking the garden, and pulled out a pen. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like something inside her had been waiting for permission to break. I love you, she wrote. I have loved you since you carried me out of that container and didn't ask if I could pay you back. Since you sat with Emma and taught her that not all powerful men are cruel. Since you looked at my $78 and understood that money wasn't the measure of what I needed. Outside, the October wind rattled the terrace doors. Dead leaves scraped across the glass like fingernails. Mia paused, listening to that sound, knowing it would haunt her memory of this moment forever. She continued writing. But I have to leave. Emma deserves a childhood without armed guards in the hallways. She deserves a life where she doesn't wake up thinking about shipping containers and darkness. Everyone who gets close to you becomes a target, and I cannot let my daughter pay that price. I will never forget you. But I have to protect her. She signed it with her name. Just her name. No love, no yours forever, nothing that would make it harder for him to let her go. Mia packed in silence. 2 bags, one for her, one for Emma's small collection of things. The photograph of Michael she held for a long moment, running her thumb across his face. She had loved him. That was real. But real love sometimes means knowing when to walk away. It was 3:16 a.m. when she carried Emma down the marble stairs, the child's head against her shoulder, the darkness broken only by the soft glow of security lights. Her bag sat by the door. She had written a check from the account Nicholas had opened for her, enough to get them to Vermont, enough to start again somewhere small and safe. Nicholas was waiting in the foyer. He stood by the entry table in a dark suit, no weapon visible but the authority surrounding him absolute. In his hands was her letter. Catherine must have found it, must have brought it to him immediately. "It's 3:41 in the morning," he said. His voice was steady, like someone discussing the weather. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye to Emma. That's how you would have done it. Let her wake up alone in a car with you, confusion replacing safety, another abandonment added to her collection." "Nicholas? Did you mean it?" He held up the letter. "This part. I love you." Her throat tightened. Emma shifted in her arms, still sleeping. "Yes. But it doesn't change anything. It changes everything." He moved closer, and there was something different in his face, some hardness that had lived there for 15 years softening at the edges. "Do you think I don't understand what you're trying to protect her from? I built my entire life around protecting people from consequences. I know exactly what my world costs. Then you understand why I have to. I understand that I'm leaving it." He took Emma gently from her arms, cradling the sleeping child with a tenderness that no one who knew him casually would believe possible. 2 years, Mia. I've already planned it. Half my operations are transitioning to legitimate business. Real estate. Investments. The kinds of things that don't require loyalty tested in blood. You can't just walk away from that world. The power, I built that empire from nothing. His voice was like stone. Carved it from my father's violence and my own rage because I didn't know there was another way. But I do now. I know because you taught me that there's a difference between being powerful and being destructive. He carried Emma back upstairs himself. Mia heard his footsteps fade into the hallway. She stood in the foyer with her packed bags, frozen between the life she had been trying to reclaim and the one standing in front of her, asking to be trusted. When he returned, he didn't speak. He simply waited, his attention on her complete and patient, the way you might wait for a wounded animal to decide if you were safe. Finally, Mia nodded. She unpacked the bags in silence. The letter she left on the table, but she didn't burn it. Some things are meant to be remembered exactly as they were written. 18 months later, the April sun was warm enough to open the terrace doors wide. Emma sat at the kitchen table drawing a picture of Nicholas's office building, the one on Hanover Street with her father's name on the brass plaque, now directing investment funds, not moving contraband. "Daddy, look," Emma called. "The windows are gold because gold is happy." Nicholas glanced over from his coffee, that small smile that had become more frequent these days. "Gold is exactly right for happy," he said. Mia stood at the kitchen counter, finishing breakfast, wearing clothes that fit properly again, clothes that didn't smell of industrial cleaning supplies. Her nursing textbooks were stacked on the office desk. She had 7 months left to finish her degree. Nicholas had insisted. He had also hired a tutor for Emma, a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, and had quietly transferred the deed to the Boston brownstone to Mia's name. Catherine came in carrying one of her paintings, a seascape with impossible light breaking through storm clouds. "I'm calling this one after," she announced, "because I believe that's where we all are now." The photograph of Michael still sat on Mia's nightstand. But next to it now was a photograph from Emma's 8th birthday party, all of them together, Nicholas in his suit without the weight of empire pressing down, Catherine laughing, Emma holding up her golden birthday crown, Mia's hand on Nicholas's arm. What Mia learned in those 18 months was that distance is never just mathematics. The gap between $78 and $125,000 was never truly about money. It was about the distance between who you believe yourself to be and who someone sees you could become. It was about Nicholas looking at her destroyed circumstances and recognizing not a charity case, but a woman worth rebuilding his entire life around. Nicholas learned that the empire his father had carved into him could be carved right back out. That power doesn't require violence to be real. That Emma could call him daddy and mean it without fear attached. That Mia could love him fully without needing to run. And Emma learned the most important lesson of all, the promise that you will never be lost again, that the people who matter will choose you every single time, that love sometimes means walking through darkness because someone lights the way. One evening in May, as the city lights reflected across the harbor, Nicholas found Mia on the terrace. He took her hand without speaking. The storm of their convergence had passed long ago, worn down to calm water and clear sky. "The storm will pass," he said, "and you are far stronger than you think." She smiled because she finally believed it. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear that impossible dates don't have to mean impossible endings. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story about survival, darkness, and the people who choose to be light. Comment below, what would you have done in Mia's position? We read every single one. We wish you good health, joy, and peace. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye, and we'll see you again in the next video.